Hello and welcome to week 2 of HSVC 360, Managing and Leading Organizations. I want to start today with a question, and the question is, what starts with an ending and ends with a beginning? So it's a bit of a riddle. What starts with an ending and ends with a beginning? So as you can see from the title slide, I've sort of given it away. What starts with an ending and ends with a beginning is change and transition. And that's going to be the topic of our lecture today. People who work in human services are often described as change agents. And this usually refers to our role in helping individuals to make changes in their lives. But it also can refer to the social justice or advocacy for social change part that we play. Today, however, we're going to talk about another type of change in which we have a role, and this type of change is organizational change. Much of how we work with individuals to help them manage change and transition will apply to how we work in organizations as well. However, there are also tools and theories particular to organizational development, the discipline of organizational development, that we can draw on in helping the organizations where we work to facilitate change. Facilitating change and transition is a very important function for a leader in an organization, no matter what level that leader is. And as you know from your own work experiences, a lot of change and transition happens in our workplace. So think about this image. What do you think this means? Change is situational. Transition is psychological. So what it means is that change is the actual event or series of events that occurs, and transition is the reaction that people have to the event or the process that people go through over time to come to terms with the new situation. It's relatively easy, for example, to change an organization structure. You can move boxes around on an organizational chart, change who reports to whom, put a new person in charge, and that's the actual change. The hard part is getting people to accept and embrace the change and then operate in the new reality as productively as possible. And that is the transition. So what are some types of changes that occur in organizations? Think about the organizations that you work for. There might be change in leadership or in other important personnel. Someone might retire, someone might get relocated or promoted or demoted or fired. There's change in technical or administrative procedures, like there's a new form you have to fill out or a new policy that's being implemented or some kind of new process. There may be a change in organizational structure, as I mentioned earlier. New teams, new supervision, new management. There might be a change in partnerships or relationships with other organizations or agencies. There is often a change in the external environment. That could be a large change or a small change. There might be a change in the political leaders that would have some impact on our organization. Maybe a natural disaster that could also impact our organization. There may be changes in funding, more funding or less funding. So these are just some of the changes that happen in organizations. You can probably think of others. What are some different ways that people react to change in the workplace? You've probably seen many of these reactions, and they're almost always emotional. These emotions can be positive or negative. They might include happiness, resistance, stress, conflict, uncertainty, fear, confusion, anger, excitement, dissatisfaction. There's a whole range of emotional responses to change that we feel in organizations. These feelings can cause either a decrease or an increase in morale in the organization, and a decrease or increase in productivity and motivation. And the trick is in how the leadership handles the change and transition. Reactions to change often depend on what is changing and how the people who are in the organization will be affected by the change. And reaction to change is individual. People go through their reactions at their own pace. So William Bridges, who is the author of a book called Managing Transitions, that we will be referring to off and on throughout this presentation, says it's not the changes that do you in, it's the transitions. So we're going to talk a little bit about the 3 phases of transition. Transition is ultimately a process that involves disengaging from the old reality and full engagement in the new reality. And the 3 phases involved in this are endings, neutral zone, and new beginnings. So if you look at this picture, this is a picture of a river, and a river can provide us with a metaphor for the process of transition. The new beginning is on the shore on the other side of the river, and somehow we're trying to get there. We're trying to get across the river to the new beginning. The ending is the shore that you're trying to leave. And the river itself is the neutral zone. It may be wide, it may be choppy, it may be narrow, it may be smooth, it may be easy to get across, it may be hard to get across. And note that the start of a change, that change starts with an ending. The transition begins with an ending, letting go of old ways and identities, dealing with the losses before you can move on to a new beginning. If you think about an experience of transition that you've had, having a child, getting married, starting school, starting a new job, moving to a new place, there's ultimately some loss that is involved with that change, no matter how happy of a change it is. Getting married means giving up some aspects of your single life that you might have liked, or giving up the right to make all your decisions by yourself. Starting a new job means perhaps leaving an old job. Moving to a new place that you're very excited about means leaving behind people and places that you're going to miss. So no matter what change is happening, change starts with endings. In the neutral zone, the old is gone and the new is not fully operational. You're kind of in the middle of things. You're in a state of flux, feeling confused, feeling like there's a lot of chaos going on. There's discomfort in working in an unsettling environment where you haven't left the old behind and you haven't completely started the new. Even though being in this state feels messy, it is normal. Any thought that leadership can have to the neutral zone and preparing for that is very important. Sometimes in the neutral zone of a change, a lot of staff turnover happens. People just can't stand being in the neutral zone. But you can also look at the neutral zone as a time for great opportunity and innovation, when old habits are replaced with new ones and new beginnings are starting to emerge. The new beginnings part of transition is when the changes are being implemented once organizations have worked through the process of ending in the neutral zone. It's a time of great fresh energy. People are adapting to new realities, they have new identities or roles, and renewed motivation. And although we call these 3 phases, they're not always linear. It may be more accurate to think of these 3 phases as processes. Sometimes they happen in a linear way, but sometimes they happen simultaneously. The important thing is that all of these phases must be experienced and be experienced successfully for change to happen. So there are some key questions when we're looking at transition. The key questions that need to be answered by the management or the leadership to their employees are, number 1, what is changing? Number 2, what will be different as a result? And number 3, who is losing what? And then in a more positive aspect, who is gaining what, or what are the benefits of the change? So, for example, I worked in an organization that went through a reorganization. And these are some of the ways that you might answer questions based on that. So, describing the change. We are reorganizing our organization from 3 divisions into 2 divisions, and the leadership is going to change from 3 leaders to 2 leaders, and we are going to have teams that have this particular function. So that might you would list out sort of the functions of the teams, who's going to be on the teams, what they will be doing differently than before, who's going to take on the work of the 3rd division that has been eliminated. And then you want to describe clearly what will be different as a result of the change. This is frequently overlooked when leaders communicate about change. It needs to be very specific. We will now have 2 divisions with the following functions. These people will be in charge of those divisions. These people report to those people. Relationship between X and Y divisions will be like this. And then you also want to discuss what is remaining the same, and also discuss how this change is going to make things better. You want to spend some time thinking about who will be losing what as a result of the change. Will someone lose power or prestige? Will someone's role be diminished? Will someone lose turf? Will people be losing familiarity? Will some people be losing their jobs? These are really important things to think about, because this is where strong reactions will occur and where people will feel demotivated if you haven't addressed these issues. Anticipate what people will need in a change. What kind of support will they need? What kind of information will they need? How can you inspire and motivate people throughout the change? It's really important to acknowledge during a change what we are losing, or acknowledge that people have a right to feel sad about change, and normalize people's emotions and reactions. You want to respect the past and what has come before, and then find a way to connect that to the future or to the new change. And it's just extremely important to communicate during a change. So here's William Bridges again. It still surprises me how often organizations undertake changes that no one can describe very clearly. So the neutral zone is a tricky part of the change, as we talked about earlier. It's also a time of great opportunity, a time to think creatively, test new ideas, and take stock of things. Although it can feel messy and scary, it is best used for identifying ways forward and fostering fresh thinking within your organization. There's many ways that you can work with the neutral zone. You can set up a team that's called the Transition Monitoring Team to help everyone get through the neutral zone and report on how things are going. You can experiment and try temporary solutions during the neutral zone, brainstorm new solutions, listen to people's ideas, continue to share a positive vision. One thing that's really tricky about change is that the leaders of the change have often been thinking of and preparing for the change for a long time, and they're anxious to get to the new beginning. However, the people who are just learning about the change need the same amount of time to prepare and process for the change. So trying to rush through or skip over the neutral zone really jeopardizes the success of change efforts. People go through change at different rates and with different levels of comfort. So you need to give people time to adjust to endings and to participate in the creative process that happens during the neutral zone. When we get to the new beginnings, there's the 4 P's that we want to talk about with new beginnings. So we want, and this again goes back to communication. What about the new beginnings do you need to communicate? You need to communicate the purpose. Why are we changing? What is the problem? How will this change fix the problem? You need to paint a picture of how it will look or feel. What is the compelling picture of a better tomorrow that you need to communicate to people? And then the plan. It needs to be very specific, not just, we're reorganizing, but what do we do on Monday? What am I going to be doing in my new role specifically? When is that going to start? And then part to play. If you can have everyone take a part or a role in the change process, you'll be very much more successful. You have to sell the problem first. What is the need or urgency? And can you explain the problem in a persuasive 1-minute message? As I said, you need to really paint a good picture of things. How are things going to be operating in a better way than before? And what specific are people going to be doing to implement the change? And what part does everyone play in the change? Who's going to be making decisions? Who's accountable for next steps? Who's going to be doing what? And what is my role? Make sure everyone has a role in the new beginning. So I want you to go to the discussion board and answer these questions. So this is a discussion board activity. Think of a change that you anticipate in the organization where you work, in the organization that you've worked with in the past, or in the organization that you're using for your case study. Review these questions related to that change and then post your answers on the discussion board. Number 1, what is changing within your organization? What will be different as a result of this change? Who is losing what as a result of this change? And then, what are 1 to 2 things you can do to help facilitate a successful transition in your organization? Be very interested to see what you have to say on the discussion board. I want to just look a little bit more about some other people's thoughts about the steps in the change process and what management needs to do throughout each step. And these are based, well, the references I'll give you at the end of this session. So first, if you look in the little orange square at the top, as you need to create urgency for the change. Determine what needs to change and why, assess the status quo and readiness to change, and then communicate why do we need to change, what is urgent about this. Get buy-in and support by forming a powerful coalition of people within the organization who support the change. Create that compelling picture, a positive vision, and a general change strategy, connecting the change that you're making in the organization to the bigger picture. Develop an action plan. Involve people, anticipate and remove obstacles, and break down the change into reasonable chunks or reasonable components of a plan or reasonable activities. Communicate the vision and plan often. I don't think you can communicate it too much. People often underestimate the amount of communication that is needed. You also need in your communication to dispel rumors, because there will be rumors flying. And then you use your communication to garner support within the organization. If you can identify quick wins or quick ways of showing positive results when you implement the change, you should start with those short-term wins. And then build on the change through quick wins, through those small activities that make up the whole plan. Consolidate your gains, emphasize what is working as you're building on it, evaluate, revise, track what is changing and how it's working, and then use that to create more change. Integrate the change into the organization's culture, create new habits, develop ways to sustain the change. And most important is to celebrate the success of the change. Celebrate the employees who are working very hard to implement the change. And again, this is not a linear process. You'll be going back and forth between these steps as the change process occurs. What's really important throughout the whole process is the box that's in the center here called communication. You need to be communicating throughout the whole process. And if you look at the long box on the bottom, you need to continue to be aware of and address people's emotions, morale, and motivation throughout the change process. So let's go back again to human services and our unique role and perspective. And here we have secret change agent man here to help us. We are uniquely qualified in the human service profession to deal with change. And there are many psychological and social work theories, interventions, and skills that we use with individuals that we can also apply to organizational change. And think a little bit about what those might be. There's our strengths-based focus and solutions-focused therapy, the stages of grief that will help us to help people manage emotions around loss. There's the stages of change theory that's related to motivational interviewing. There's a systems perspective that we bring as human services providers. And there's our skills in conducting assessments, in framing problems, and in managing emotions and resistance. And all of these make us as human service workers particularly successful in helping organizations to manage change and transition. Just to summarize some of the key takeaway points from today. Change is situational, so change is situational, change is an event. Transition is psychological, and transition is a process. Transition starts with an ending and ends with a beginning. The phases of transition are endings, neutral zone, and new beginnings. Effectively communicating throughout the change process will make the transition easier. So that ends this part of our session for today, and I look forward to hearing from you on the discussion board. Thanks.